Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for jumping on board, and on the line with me, I welcome back Bill Brown, the Astros broadcaster emeritus. How do you like that title, Brownie? Does that work?
Well, that's a promotion. Thank you, Robert. That's very nice.
Now, I know you saw Brooks and Dunn at the rodeo last week. Now, this wasn't Brooks Robinson and Adam Dunn, right?
I know you don't think I can distinguish, but I do like I like old country music, and they put on quite a show. They really did.
Yeah, my sister was there. They said they still get it done, and they're like around 65 or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of energy. I think the audience was just thrilled. 71,000 people. It was an electric, charge type atmosphere, and I hadn't been to the rodeo in more than 20 years, so that was a good night for us.
Oh, that's cool. And yeah, I went to go to the rodeo the Monday before Brooks and Dunn, and actually Casey Musgraves sang Neon Moon.
Ah, yeah.
Let's get the Astros. They've had an interesting offseason. They added Michael Brantley, Robinson Chirinos, Wade Miley, and Aledmus Diaz. Barring something unforeseen, they've lost Keuchel, Tony Sipp, Brian McCann, Evan Gattis, Charlie Morton, and Marwin Gonzalez. I think that's the whole list. Brownie, what did you think of their offseason, and can you lose that many good beards and still win a championship?
I hadn't thought of it in terms of the follicle count, but maybe not. I don't know. Actually, to get serious, though, about it, I think that they could use Keuchel in the rotation now, certainly, but I believe that train has long since gone. But I wouldn't be shocked to see them pick up another starting pitcher. There are still a few of them out there. I'm not a big Gio Gonzalez fan, but there might be something that would happen. I think probably, Robert, it seems to me that what Jeff Luhnow has decided to do is just kind of punt for now and wait until June or July and get a much better fix on what kind of team this is and what the component parts might be that could be missing for winning a World Series, and try to acquire that at that time.
You've seen Michael Brantley over the years. What do you remember about the times that you've watched him play?
Just a very tough out. And I think, I was looking at the list of hitters who would be available as free agents when it was apparent that they would lose Marwin, and I thought Brantley was the perfect fit. I don't know that they could have done much better. You knew they weren't going to get Harper or Machado or anything like that, but to me, Brantley is just perfect for this team because of the fact that they desperately needed a left-handed hitter, and he is a high-contact hitter, really knows the strike zone, extremely disciplined. They had a lot more strikeouts last year than the year before. And a lot of it was, quite frankly, because the players didn't have as good a years other than Alex Bregman, and Gurriel had a good year. But there were a lot of guys who fell off. And I think that some of the at-bats were not very good last year. I think some people were pressing. And I think Brantley is just perfect for this lineup. They just, with Reddick not producing last year, they really need another left-handed hitter who can step up and come through in the clutch.
Now, I hate to put you on the spot, but have you put together your opening day lineup yet? Who would Brownie have in there? I mean, you got to figure out who your DH is. Who would you put there? And where does Brantley fit in? Should Hinch break up that big four, do you think, at the top to fit him in somewhere, since he is a lefty?
That's the real question. Okay, so opening day, I'm assuming lefty Blake Snell is on the mound, which makes it a little different. But Tyler White's the DH for me. And I think Brantley hits, Springer leads off as always. I'm toying in my mind about Altuve hitting second. We'll see. I think that Bregman needs to hit third if you're going there, and that would make Brantley the number 4 hitter. And then maybe Gurriel and White and on down the line. But
no, you missed Correa, though. Where do you put him?
Oh, yeah, I did miss Correa. My gosh, I don't know. That's a real problem. And see, that shows you that this team should be really good at scoring runs. So I would, Correa's thumping the ball right now. I would want him in the middle of the lineup somewhere. And so maybe, I hate to put Brantley in the 3 spot because I think Bregman deserves that. But maybe put Brantley fourth and Correa fifth. I think that would work.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm interested to see what Hinch is going to do with this. Especially, you said it on opening day. It's going to be totally different, maybe because it's the lefty on the mound. But I could even foresee him maybe in the 2 spot. Maybe you put Brantley in the 2 spot. I don't know.
I think you can. And especially maybe against a tough lefty like Snell, you might want that because I think he's going to make some contact. But as far as slugging, that would be more difficult against a Snell. But against a right-handed pitcher, I think Brantley's got to hit 3, 4, 5 somewhere in there.
Any concern over starting pitching at the 4 and 5 spots? We talked about the loss of Keuchel and Charlie Morton. You've got McHugh, who's dealing with a sore back. Josh James now out of the mix with the quad. Framber Valdez, just a few starts. And the worst news of all, Brad Peacock learned to change up by watching Trevor Hoffman on Twitter. I mean, Brownie, what does Trevor Hoffman know about change-ups? I mean, come on.
I think he'd be the master as far as learning from someone. Yeah, that would be a good place to start. But I would have some mild concerns about the rest of the rotation. I would. Especially if McHugh, for some reason, isn't able to do what he did when he was a starter. And I think, Miley was great last year in a half a season when he wasn't injured. If he can continue that, then that would alleviate concerns. But I really think what you're going to find is come June or July is that don't be surprised if you're looking at Forrest Whitley's in the rotation. Don't be too surprised if maybe another guy like Corbin Martin finds his way into the rotation at some point later on in the season. But pending the health of the starters, that would be really the caveat here in this situation, I think.
It looks like it's Framber or Peacock for that 5th spot. And I guess I was going to lean over the offseason towards Framber because he gives you the lefty look, but also if anything goes wrong, you've got Peacock there. You can move him back into the starting rotation, but maybe you want to go with the veterans at this point because maybe you're just expecting, the guys like Forrest Whitley or Corbin Martin or one of those guys to come up later in the year anyway. I don't know. How do you see that?
The way I see it in this early part of spring training is that Framber is not throwing enough strikes to be the number 5 man in the rotation. And for me, Peacock would be that guy as of right now if the season opened. And, of course, a lot of things will change. But I would send Framber back for more seasoning and for more strike zone work. How
comfortable are you with Roberto Osuna as a closer? I mean, on the Astros sliding scale, if 1999 Billy Wagner is a 10 and Ken Giles is a 4, where's Osuna? And Brownie, I know you, and I'm anxious to see how you slip out of this diplomatically.
I would put him at an 8 or a 9. I think he is fantastic at throwing strikes. He can do that with different pitches. And the thing, as you know, it's a tightrope with so many of these closers, even the best ones today. It's an absolute tightrope. And Osuna will get hit from time to time, but he'll have a lot of quick 1, 2, 3 innings too, because he's in the strike zone. He's not dodging around a whole lot. So I think the fact that he could throw maybe 8 or 10 pitches and get a save and then be fresh for the next night could be a key for this team.
Angels made a lot of good moves over the offseason. The Mariners seem to be kind of punting on things. The A's were great last year. Looking over that AL West, Rangers, I don't know if they're really in the mix at this point, but do you think the Angels can make this interesting? And can the A's do it again? Do they have enough to get this done again and pull off another great season?
I don't think the A's do. I'm kind of looking at the Angels as a team with Ausmus taking over and kind of changing the tone. It always comes down to pitching for them. Their starting pitchers are almost always hurt. They do have some different guys in the mix this year. If they can pitch and stay healthy, then, yeah, I think they could be a surprise team. But I really don't see any team other than the Astros being much above 500 this year.
Anything that you've seen or heard from watching spring training or listening to the reports that has got you excited or interested, or just anything that's on your mind after the first week or two down there?
Well, I think one thing we can see, Robert, is that Jeff Luhnow probably was very wise in not parting with a Forrest Whitley, with a Kyle Tucker, who I think is going to get it. He's going to be good, but he needs more time. With these other prospects, I really like Yordan Alvarez. I think Alvarez is probably not too far from being able to help this club. And there again would be another left-handed hitter if they're able to get him to the big leagues. I wouldn't be shocked if it happened at some point this year. He really covers the strike zone well, hits the ball hard to left field as a left-handed hitter. I think he's extremely impressive. So I think by Jeff holding on to these prospects, we're now seeing in these spring training games exactly why he did that. And sure, it would have been great to have a Real Muto, but I think the expense was way too high. If you believed the reports that the Marlins had to have, Whitley and Tucker, then he certainly did the right thing in not dealing.
I want to ask you about a couple of important passings over the offseason. I'm too young to remember Frank Robinson, the player. What memories do you have of Robbie?
Very tough physically. He was hit by pitches constantly, and he just stayed right in and hit the ball hard. Big time home run and RBI hitter. And he was a tough physical man. Alan Ashby told the story about when Frank was a player manager with Cleveland and Alan was on the team and they went to play their AAA club. And there was a pitcher that Robbie had sent down to the minor leagues who was pitching against him that night. And this pitcher was very perturbed that he wasn't on the big league club. And they wound up duking it out on the mound after Robinson hit a ball. They threw him out. He went right for the mound and they had it out with each other.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to how competitive and how determined he was. But, I knew him a little bit, just a casual word here and there, but I know that he had his difficulties with people. Several people felt his knuckles, shall we say, during his lifetime.
There was a weird game I was reading about. You remember this game where when he was managing against the Astros, there was a pitcher that just was giving up one steal after another, and he did a double switch. It was kind of a weird double switch and not usual, I guess, at the time in the middle of the game.
Yeah, it was the catcher. The catcher couldn't throw anybody out, and he got him out of the game. He went to the mound not to change pitchers, but to change catchers.
Oh, wow.
And he was actually so emotionally distraught after the game in his press conference by having to embarrass this catcher by removing him from the game that he was in tears. That's a terrible thing to do. You just don't want to destroy a guy's career, but for trying to win a game, that's what he had to do. He made the right move, and it's difficult issue, but I think that showed the opposite side of what we've been talking about on Frank Robinson, that he really did care about his players.
All right. In late November, President George H.W. Bush passed away. He wrote the foreword, Brownie, to your book, Houston Astros Deep in the Heart. You and I visited his office here in Houston a couple of years ago, and I saw on social media that, among other things, you met up with the train that was part of his final procession here in Houston. What do you remember, I guess, first about that day, and what do you think of when you think of the president?
Well, I think of somebody who was a very good president and really cared about people, and I've known a couple of people. I did not ever have the pleasure of meeting him, but I've known people who have worked for him. And I will tell you a story about one time he lost a Senate campaign here, and one of his staffers was his campaign manager. And early the next morning after the loss, Mr. Bush came down to the office, and he was already in the office when the staffer came in. He was already working. And the staffer said, well, what are you doing here so early? There's no work to be done. He said, oh, yeah, there is. I have to find you guys jobs. And I think that speaks to his character probably about as much as anything I've heard about him, that it wasn't about him, and he was just really concerned about people. So just a very, very decent man. And I had a chance to be invited to go to Ellington Field when the plane came in, and the Astros had a small contingent who were invited. And I can tell you, I had my camera there, and I thought, well, this is history. I want to take some shots of this. And I was not really invited to be with the media, but I didn't have a pass, but I just sort of horned in and walked up the steps to, there were some bleachers where the media people were taking pictures of the whole proceedings. TV camera people, still camera. And I can just tell you that for an hour while that plane landed and taxied and the casket was unloaded, and put into the hearse, there was not a sound. Nobody spoke a word. And for you to be around a media gathering, even covering an event, with complete silence, that is a memorable happening. And then, of course, with the train, that was something that we have toured the Bush Library 3 or 4 times in College Station. And we had heard the story of how he had made arrangements to be on a train to take him to the library when everything was said and done. And so I'd anticipated this, and I had thought, years ago, gee, that'd be neat to come out and see this. And then here it is unfolding. So I drove out to Magnolia because I had read that was a good place to get pictures of the train, and it wasn't going to be too congested there. And again, it was just one of those reverent experiences where people just, they turned out, they were waiting, they were in their folding chairs, they got their hours ahead of time, and then the train actually did slow down coming through Magnolia. It didn't slow down at some of the other stops, but out of respect for the public, and the family, of course, was waving to people through the windows of the train. So just a very moving experience. And we want to go up to the library too with the grandkids when they come in another month or so to just give them a sense of what his presidency was all about. But I wish I had met him, but not everybody was that fortunate.
You never met Barbara in all the time she was at the games?
No, never did. They got there so late. We were always upstairs getting ready to go on the air and that kind of thing. And it just never did happen that we met them.
Wow. Another person that you had a lot of contact, a lot of connection with was Marty Brennaman, 45 years, the voice of the Reds. He announced over the offseason that he'll retire after this year. For those people out there that might not remember, you were on the Reds broadcast team in the early days, right? Like a couple of years after he started.
Right. I was doing TV and he arrived. Al Michaels was there before him. And then Marty was hired when Al went to San Francisco. A funny story, which you may have read. Marty's first ever broadcast in the big leagues. He's at spring training, and the Reds at that time trained in Tampa at Al Lopez Field. And Al Lopez was a Hall of Fame catcher who was from Tampa. So Marty came on the air and said, all this hullabaloo all winter long about, you're replacing Al Michaels as a big star, and you're coming from AAA Tidewater. Is there pressure? So he'd answered all these questions. I heard the interview with him afterwards. He was talking about how he was quite nervous. But the first game was on the road. And he handled that one really well. No mistakes at all. Now it's the home opener, and he's already done one game, so he's got the butterflies all worked out. So he's not nervous at all for the opener from Al Lopez Field. And the first thing he said, "Hi, everybody. This is Marty Brennaman from Al Michaels Field in Tampa, Florida." No, but great broadcaster. He's won the Ford Frick Award many years ago. His son, Tom, may win it someday himself. And I'll say this about Marty. He has never shied away from criticizing players. Never. He's one of the most aggressive broadcasters in terms of letting the listener know exactly what he thought a player should have done and where he failed. And I've seen him standing toe-to-toe with guys around the batting cage, and he did not budge when the guy got on him for criticizing him. That was Marty's style, and he never changed it.
I was about to ask, is that what made him such a special guy to the Reds nation and to that fan base?
I think he did. I don't think they had that type of broadcaster before. Joe Nuxhall was not that way at all. But they were a great pair together, and I think that did endear him to Reds fans because, believe it or not, not a compliment, but people would tell me when I was doing TV, well, we turned the sound down and listened to radio. It's an old-fashioned area, and people would go out on the back porch in the summertime, and they'd have a TV on, but they grew up listening to radio, and they wanted to keep listening to radio. So that was a compliment to Marty, but not to me.
Outside of baseball, what's the coolest thing you've had a chance to see or do that maybe you wouldn't have in the last couple of years if you were still calling the games?
Well, the thing is now that we have the freedom to go on vacations in the summer, which we never did. So we went to Banff in Canada last year, which was fantastic, just to, go on a helicopter ride with the camera up over the mountains and look down and get some shots. That's a thrilling opportunity. And, we're going to go to Wyoming this year. So we are planning to make use of this summertime that we now have that we didn't have for all those years.
You spent some time in Minnesota, I believe. Do you have any suggestions for Marwin?
Yeah, I know Marwin. Every time I remember it being 30 degrees or maybe a little bit warmer, Marwin has had a ski cap mask on. So I recommend that Marwin get about 6 or 7 of those this year, because right now our family lives up there, our daughter and 3 grandkids and our son-in-law, and it's I think 24 below right now. I doubt if Marwin wants to hear that at this moment.
Yeah, my uncle lives in Minnesota, and I got a picture the other day. I couldn't even see his house. The snow was so high.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, we're looking forward to the baseball season, and just always fun to catch up with you. Always good to hear your voice, because that just reminds all of us that the Astros are just around the corner, too.
Well, thanks. I'm excited about it, Robert, and look forward to seeing you at the ballpark soon.
Don't forget to follow Houston Sports Talk on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us on iTunes, the Google Podcast app, or the Stitcher app. Give us a 5-star review on iTunes when you get the chance, and tell your friends about us. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Hey there, I'm Max Friedman.
And I'm Eli Blackwitz. We're hosts of Tackling the Texans, brought to you by the Pulse Podcast Network. If you love the Houston Sports Talk podcast, then you should go ahead and listen to our weekly podcast where we talk about everything exciting around the NFL and what it means for Houston. We keep you updated on all things Texans with interesting debates and hot takes, making sure to bring on NFL experts from around the industry to keep you connected. Subscribe to Tackling the Texans on Apple Podcasts or give us a listen on any available platforms.